You know how everything's a subscription now? Music, movies, even socks. I swear if it...
To continue this ad, please upgrade to Premium Plus Platinum.
What? No. Anyway, Blue Apron...
This is a pay-per-listen ad. Please confirm your billing.
Oh, that's annoying. At least with the new Blue Apron, there's no subscription needed. Get delicious meals delivered without the weekly plan.
Wait, no subscription?
Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Stop! Before you drag yourself to that coffee pot tomorrow morning, try this instead. Tonight, fill a shaker with water. Add 1 scoop of Early Bird and put it on your nightstand. When your alarm screams at 5 a.m., drink it first. What happens next will shock you. Your brain doesn't gradually wake up, it switches on. The fog vanishes, you're not surviving your morning, you're conquering it. This blood orange mimosa ritual turned more than 1,000 night owls into morning warriors this week alone. Get yours at clubearlybird.com and use code NEVERSNOOZE for 20% off.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 479 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have one spooky story for you today, and our story comes from the 15th of September 2025. And our story today comes from Burr. Now, you might remember Burr from the episode Room T79, which was mini episode 322, and it was released on February the 25th, 2024, which is absolutely worth a re-listen. The story of Room T79 sort of became like an instant Real Life Ghost Stories classic. And it was the story, if you need to have your memory jogged, it was the story of an office in a hospital that ended up being next to the morgue. And it was very scary. So, it's been a while since I last wrote to you. Almost 2 years. Since I last wrote, I have had quite a few intriguing conversations with people about their experiences with the supernatural. It was all born out of that one story that has quickly made its way around our circle of friends and co-workers. First, I'll update you on what happened after the last story I sent you. Sam got better and is back at work after some treatment and changes to how his condition is managed. Mo is still cheery AF, and now fully believes that every building on the planet is haunted. Alex is, well, let's just say a tad more open to the supernatural. She listens to the podcast now and can appreciate it for all its paranormal glory. I am now, however, a ghost story magnet. So I have 2 different stories to tell you this time. Hopefully they will be shorter than the last mammoth I sent you. Each of them has been told to me by a person who heard about Room T79. One is directly related to that story, and one is about being up the hill, mountain climbing in Scotland. They are both from logical, rational health professionals, and are both pretty fucking scary. After me and the 3 doctors talking about the happenings in Room T79, word spread around our immediate colleagues. After a month or so, a specialist doctor who has worked in the hospital for about 10 years approached me and started asking me about Alex and the guy's experiences. He had heard the story through the grapevine and was suitably creeped out. He had worked in that corridor before. He wasn't based in that particular office, but had been in it briefly. I'll tell the story in his own words as best I can. It was the end of March 2020 and COVID-19 had just reared its ugly head. Everyone was panicked, cancelling procedures and clinics left, right and centre. A truly awful time for health professionals, patients and the frightened general public. However, as we must, the health service limped on. We started up telehealth clinics, calling patients and doing video calls with those who had the technology. As we were now all stuck at home or in offices as opposed to sitting in outpatient clinics, it was difficult to find a desk. This was when I first heard of a room along the corridor that could be used. although it only had one PowerPoint for a computer. It was an old pair of rooms that were earmarked for refurbishment, but that was yet to happen. It used to be the waiting room for the mortuary, but the new waiting room had just been opened, so it was empty. The room was T79. I took a laptop from our office and grabbed my headset and walked along the corridor. It was nearly lunchtime, so I thought I'd take my things along, get set up and then go for lunch. My clinic started at 2 p.m, so I had plenty of time to eat, walk back, read my notes and log on. I didn't have a key because I was told the room would be open for me. I got there and it was. I opened the door and looked around the room. It only had one desk, some shelves, and looked in dire need of a good vacuum. It smelled musty and strange, so my instinct was to open the window. Just off the office was another room. It wasn't being used for anything and had no windows and could only be accessed through the main office room. It was filled with chairs and had some depressing old paintings of scenery on the walls. I guessed this was the old waiting room. It seemed really stale in there, even more than the office, but there wasn't an actual door in the doorway, so I just had to bear it. I plugged my laptop in, checked that there was connectivity to the hospital Wi-Fi, and quickly checked my emails. I sat with my back to the waiting room doorway, as that was where the PowerPoint was. There was nothing visibly wrong with the two rooms, but I genuinely felt that someone was in that room behind me. After checking my emails, I got up and made my way to the canteen. I shut the laptop, left the window open and closed the room door. In the canteen, I chatted with the other doctors across spaced out tables, well, more of a shout. Social distancing was in full effect, and although it was in the elementary days, things were starting to get pretty real. I finished my lunch and thought about how weird the world was getting. As I walked back to the temporary office I was placed in, I got to the door of the room and pushed the handle confidently, only to be met with a stubborn response. The door was locked. I didn't lock it. I didn't have any bloody keys. I was also only gone for about 25 minutes, so who had come along and locked it behind me? Anyway, I called security and asked them to come along and unlock it for me. While the guy was on the phone, I asked if anyone had just come along and locked the door behind me. He asked his colleague and then replied, "No, neither of us have been anywhere for the past 30 minutes, we just had lunch." I hung up. Right, okay, that's a bit strange. So the security guy turns up and unlocks the door. I say thanks while looking a bit like either an idiot or a liar. He buggers off and I step into the room. I now have 10 minutes to set up and read my first patient's notes. I shut the door behind me and turn to my laptop. It's open, switched on, and has the health service background displaying. It normally goes to sleep a few minutes after being idle. The room window is also closed. I definitely left it open. What the fuck? This is a bit bizarre. Anyway, I open the window again, log into the laptop and start looking through notes. Everything is fine for the first couple of video calls. Patients are really cheery and grateful to be seen in these circumstances. They actually seemed to be more comfortable as they were in their own home rather than in the hospital environment. However, I could still feel a weird feeling from the room behind me. I frequently looked behind me between calls. I'm not sure what I expected to see, but I kept doing it anyway. I'm now on to my third or fourth call of the afternoon. It's a young woman, mid-20s, and she is just as pleasant as everyone else that day. We are nearing the end of the call and her eyes keep flitting to the corner of the screen. I didn't really notice it at first. Then I thought she had pop-ups on her screen or something. After a minute or so, she looks again and furrows her brow. "Sorry, is there someone in that room behind you?" I swear to God, when I say my heart dropped, that is a total understatement. I can see the room behind me on the small square at the bottom of the screen. There is no one there. I turn around. There's no one there. I say to the woman, "No, it's just us." The woman says, Well, I'm sure I saw a woman wearing a brown skirt and a cream-coloured jumper in the room behind you. I honestly didn't know what to say. It's one thing maybe seeing a possible person in the shadows in a background, but it's a whole other thing seeing a woman and being able to describe her clothes. My following actions were governed by my desperate need for this not to be happening, and my professional role as a doctor. I got up, walked into the room next door and looked around. There is no one there. I'm 50% relieved and 50% terrified. I compose myself, turn around, walk back to my chair and say, "Nope, there is no one there. We are alone and this is a safe space to talk. You must have seen the department secretary popping by." Yes, I told the patient a lie, but it was definitely better than saying that there are fucking ghosts hopping about next door. So she smiles and laughs and we finish the call. I had a few more calls to do, including notes after each call. I finish up and gather my things. Walking out the door, I still swear there is someone in the room next door. I take one last look to check. No one. No other way in or out, not even through a window. Cool. Okay, off I pop. After that day, I didn't use that room again. I just made sure I found somewhere else. I'm a pretty straight-laced non-believer, to be honest. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. I'll be honest though, I was definitely a bit more spooked when I heard your friend's story that the old waiting room was now closed off. I don't know what that room was all about, but I am definitely not keen to go back. So yeah, that is one of the stories I've been told off the back of Alex's experience. I have heard a few others, but they were smaller and more subtle. This one was a bit more real, more creepy. The next one is from a guy I know who enjoys going Monroe bagging, which is when you drive out to the Scottish countryside and climb up one or several of the 282 mountains over 3,000 feet in a day. In this wilderness you might come across a bothy, which is a small building, either stone or wooden construction, owned by the Mountain Bothy Association. These bothies are for walkers to stop, eat and or sleep in before continuing their journey onward. It is customary to use the small supplies that may be there, but to make sure that you leave something behind before you leave for the next person. People often leave firewood, a book, a tin of soup or even some whiskey. Anyway, I told the story of room T79 to this guy, and the guy's friend says, "Tell her about that time you were up the hill." I was so intrigued. So he tells me the following story. Again, I'll write it in his words. It was early one Saturday morning in April and I was setting out to climb 3 Monroes in a remote area in the Scottish Highlands. Most Monroes are relatively remote, but these days they are usually quite busy with walkers, particularly on a Saturday. I was going for an area where there were a lot of mountains, but they were actually properly remote. I'm an experienced outdoors guy, so I was going it alone and with the intention of staying in an MBA bothy along the way. So I drove out in the early hours of the morning and got close as I could to the first mountain. I had of course told 2 different people exactly where I was going, what route I was taking and when I would message to say that I was back at the car. I was also taking a tracking device, my phone, and a backup charging device just in case. I had a backpack with supplies and my 4-season sleeping bag as it was April and this is the Scottish Highlands. I set off as it had just gotten light and I enjoyed the morning mist and the low cloud. I'd studied the trail to take and had it almost committed to memory. I also had a detailed map of the area and a printed copy of the route description. The plan was to do all 3 Monroes at a slow pace and stop at the bothy before walking back the next day via the glen. I'd be knackered at the bothy, so was sure to get a good night's sleep no matter what. I love climbing hills, seeing the countryside at its best and being alone with my thoughts. It's a great way to unwind. But this trip was not the most relaxing that I've ever had. I made it up the first summit quite quickly, that's often the case, eager to get up for the views. It was bitterly cold at the top, so I decided to take a few snaps, then make the descent to the lowest point between the first and the second summit. The mist was rolling in and out the entire time, so I only had a few glimpses of the views. I was hoping that by the time I made the third summit it would be clear before my final descent. So far, I was alone. I hadn't seen any other walkers. This was bliss. The early time of the season plus the less than perfect conditions had hopefully turned people off the idea. I got down to the low point and it was a bit warmer and more sheltered from the wind. I got out my sandwiches and my flask of coffee and had a nice lunch with a stunning backdrop. Just as I was about to set off again, I caught a glimpse of something moving on the summit that I had just left. I squinted and spotted what I was sure was a man, on his own, leaving the summit and walking towards me. Great, I bet he's heading this way. Hopefully he is just doing 2 peaks and then turning back, because I really can't be bothered sharing the bothy tonight. I just wanted peace and solitude. His image eventually disappeared in the mist and I kept on walking. The second summit had better views. It was a bit lower than the first. I took it all in and enjoyed watching some big birds flying just a bit lower than the summit. It's always amazing to see these birds from above. Makes you feel like you're in the clouds. I looked back to see if the man was still behind me. I couldn't see him on the trail, so I assumed he had turned back for the day, thank fuck. No awkward conversations in the digs overnight. I kept walking, slowly descending a more gravelly, scree-littered slope. I was then facing the largest of the 3 hills. Awesome. This looks like a bit of a beast. I was looking forward to the climb. I had dilly-dallied this far, sitting about and taking photos, and was starting to fall a bit behind my planned timings. The last descent was trickier than expected and took a bit longer. If I wanted to get to the bothy before shit weather and darkness rolled in, I better hustle this last one. I didn't mind though. I had plenty of gas in the tank and loved to set myself a challenge. More than halfway between these 2 peaks, I turned back at the last peak that I'd climbed, to double check that guy definitely wasn't there. I looked all the way up over the scree that I'd carefully scurried down, and not a trace. Nice. The climb up the final hill was pretty grueling, but I munched my way through half a sharing pack of fruit pastilles at the bottom, so I was full of sugar to propel my way up. I got to the top and was rewarded by insanely beautiful, half misty, half clear views. Gorgeous. I sat and took it all in, again watching the birds circling around the peak. I turned back to get a view of the 2 peaks behind me, to look at what I had accomplished. Then I saw him. This time right at the bottom of the peak that I was on. What on earth? How had he appeared again? Surely he couldn't have caught up. I hadn't seen him from the second peak. It didn't make any sense. There aren't any places to hide on these barren landscapes, so how could he be there? Well, he's there now, and given the time of day and the pending weather, he can only be headed to one place. The bothy. I headed down the hill, slightly pissed off but also a bit bewildered about the guy. The going was tough and my legs were getting a bit sore. Going downhill always seems to get me. My joints must be fed up with all these hills. I'd done about 40 of the 282 Munros by this point and didn't plan on doing all of them. I don't think my body was planning on doing all of them either. I felt the wind pick up a bit and specks of rain intermittently hit my face. The weather was closing in, and I knew there was only about 2 hours of light left. The bothy was still about an hour away, so I quickened my pace across the marsh and focused on my goal. I had looked back a few times and hadn't seen the guy. Although I really didn't want to share my adventure, I really hoped he would be alright. The bothy appeared in front of me like an oasis in the desert. I was pleased to see it. Stone built with green painted wood and a slate roof. Perfect. It was one of the nicer bothies I had seen and looked to be well maintained. And empty. I got up to the door, opened it and stepped inside. It was clean and dry with a nice little fireplace a table with chairs, and a raised sleeping area. I'd brought some kindling and an extra long life fire log to last me through the night. However, I noticed that the estate that owned the bothy had a nice big pile of dry logs next to the fireplace. Jackpot. I started the fire and felt cosy and warm in no time. I hung up my sodden gear and rolled out my sleeping bag. I'd brought some beans, sausages and rolls with me to make a nice dinner. Once that was polished off, I slipped out my luxury item, a hip flask of malt whiskey. Outside it was stunning, completely silent. The rain had tapered off, and once it got dark you could see the most incredible blanket of stars. Every square millimetre of sky was studded with stars. Hard to comprehend, and it made me feel so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The wind was howling though, so I didn't want to stay outside too long. Then, something caught my eye. And my ear. I could hear something moving in the close distance, the seriously close distance. It sounded like my footsteps through the marsh from earlier, definitely on 2 feet. I also swear I could see something moving in the direction of the sound. I couldn't make out what it was, but it was moving in rhythm with the sound. It didn't look like a deer. It looked human. There is no way that guy is out there. No fucking way. He would have had to descend the biggest mountain in the area in the dark and the rain without a torch. No way. I spun around and bolted back inside the bothy, drank a few sips of whiskey and willed myself to sleep. I tossed and turned that night, despite being so tired. I kept thinking that the guy was going to walk through the door. The next morning I woke up alone, thank fuck. I packed all my stuff up and tidied up the fireplace. I left the extra long life fire log behind to replace the wood I'd used. Plus I had another bag of fruit pastilles. They got left on the table. Who knows, maybe the guy on the hill would be appeased by them. I walked outside and looked around. Nothing in sight. Just a nice semi-sunny day to walk quickly back. I headed out and followed the trail that led all the way around the 3 hills and back to the car. I didn't see a soul until I got back to the car about 5 or so hours later, and there were a couple of folk dotted about on walks. None of them looked like the guy. I jumped into the car, messaged my friends, and drove home. This story creeped me out and put me off going out on the hill for the foreseeable. There were other stories I've been told since room T79. Maybe I'll properly document them like the 2 I've wrote about today. It's just funny how telling people about an experience can turn you into a magnet for this stuff. I'm just really glad that no spooky stuff has happened to me. However, speaking to my husband has reminded me of some things that happened years ago in a house that we rented in the middle of nowhere. Nothing as scary as the stories I've been told by others, but maybe worth writing down and sending to you. So maybe this won't be the last that you'll hear from me. Now this is what happens when you share stories, right? You share stories and people go, hey, I heard that story and I've got a story that I would like to share. And I hope that for some people, even just listening to these stories is cathartic. And then for other people, sharing their own stories is cathartic. And knowing that your story is being shared and it's not going to be judged, it's not going to be ridiculed, you're not going to be ridiculed, nobody's going to go, you're crazy, that didn't happen. That's not what we're all about, you know? And Burr, I love that you have become the ghost story magnet. You know, that everyone is coming to you being like, hey, are you the person that I share ghost stories with? Because I have got some spooky stories for you. And obviously, T79, it was never going to be just that story, was it? Room T79 is clearly incredibly haunted. And I am dying to go and visit room T79, which obviously not really appropriate in a medical facility, but still. And I can't even imagine what it must have felt like for that doctor to have had that experience in room T79, right? And the experience was preempted by them feeling like there was something wrong, feeling like there was something in the room. And if you remember from the story of room T79, the original story, there were a lot of little things that happened, like keys being moved, doors being locked. In this instance, you know, the window is closed. In the previous stories, the books were turned around the wrong way. Like, there were things that were happening. Something was going, hello, I am here. And then the validation of having somebody on a Zoom call being like, sorry, is there somebody else in the room with you? Is there somebody in that room behind you? Because obviously, if you're doing like a medical appointment over Zoom, you want to know that you are in a place that's where you can be confidential and you can talk openly and it's a safe space, etc. So I would also be like, hello, sorry, yes, there's somebody behind you, because I don't want to be having conversations with you about my private medical stuff if there's somebody else in the room. Honestly, that doctor did so well not to immediately go, we're haunted. Me and you, we're haunted. You are now involved in this too. You're involved in this situation. It's the two of us against whatever ghost exists in that room. And I do also know that there were other people that were very interested in the story of T79. Other podcasts, other productions were very interested in that story. The story of Room T79 like caught the imaginations of so many people. And I'm so glad that we've gotten an update, or just another little story to say, hey, yeah, that room is weird. Weird shit happened there. And it's also been ages since we've had a bothy story on the podcast. We talked about bothies a million bazillion years ago because I am fascinated by them. These little structures that are up in the mountains and whatever, that are there just for people to go and use and sleep in and maybe cook their dinner in while they're out on long walks. And it seems like a lot of these bothies bring with them paranormal experiences. And I wonder if what this man was seeing on the mountain was a residual energy of maybe somebody who had previously walked on the mountain and maybe lost their life when bad weather rolled in and they weren't prepared. Because we all know that the Scottish Highlands can be an unforgiving place in bad weather. So is it as simple as this person seeing the residual energy of a man that, you know, had done this walk previously? But if I was in a bothy on my own overnight, I mean, I never would be in a million years, but if I was for some ungodly reason, and I heard the sound of footsteps and saw what appeared to be a man walking towards the bothy, it would take more than whiskey for me to survive that night, my friend. Two absolutely fantastic stories today from Burr. Burr, thank you so much for sending in your story. And remember, Burr's story came from the 15th of September 2025. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or for $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
If you're a smoker or vapor ready to make a change, you really only need one good reason. But with Zyn nicotine pouches, you'll discover many good reasons. Zyn is America's #1 nicotine pouch brand. Plus, Zyn offers a robust rewards program. There are lots of options when it comes to nicotine satisfaction, but there's only one Zyn. Check out zyn.com/find to find Zyn at a store near you. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.